Hey everyone, welcome back to another episode of Parenting is Easy, Said No One Ever. I am your host, Chananya Abraham, and I am so excited to share with you an amazing conversation I just finished with Keith, who is going to tell us about building, about planting, about religion, or how to have a healthy family culture, which is something that as a parent, I'm very, very passionate about. And it's something that I think we can all use a little bit of a refresher course in a certain way. I think Keith is someone that's an amazing individual, a father of 6 kids, has an amazing company that he's going to talk about as well, Army vet, and I think someone that I probably could have talked to probably for another hour or two. As to be honest, from the list that I prepared to talk to him about, maybe got through maybe 3% of the whole list of questions I wanted to get to. So maybe we'll have some future conversation. But for the time being, I hope you enjoy this nice conversation that I had with Keith. And remember, as always, please like and subscribe to anywhere you listen or you are watching this podcast, whether you're on YouTube, Stitcher, or anywhere else you might be listening to this. As well as if you'd like to reach out to us, if you have any ideas for future guests, if you have any questions, comments, critiques, and we take it all, please reach out to us either on our social media pages or at parentingiseasypodcast@gmail.com. There are so many different areas, that I know that you and I can have a conversation with, but I think the thing that stood out for me, why I wanted to talk to you is as a parent of multiple kids in the sense of having 6 kids on your own. I think one of the biggest things that I've always found to be like difficult when it comes to being a parent is balancing the role of the parent with each kid individually. When you have a herd that you're sort of trying to look after as best as we possibly can. So I'm curious to hear from you, Keith. How do you go about making sure that every kid is getting what it is that they need, but yet at the same time also keeping that family structure that you're trying to keep as a whole?
I've had to think about that recently because I don't know that I'm doing it that well. I'm thinking about it, and that's probably the 50+% solution is that it's being thought about, and therefore, the actions are going to be colored by it. There are some of my children who just naturally gravitate to being with me, doing whatever it is, and that's like there's no trying. There is some trying with some other ones. I would say, my oldest son and my oldest daughter are, for various reasons, like they're the ones that I have to try the most. The oldest daughter is pushing 17 now. She's driving. She has a job outside the home. And so, yeah, she's got to be gone after. And she's very busy with school. She's a very hard worker with school. And so it's almost like, I think, hey, come hang out with me. And she's like, no, Dad, I'm being responsible. Stop distracting me from the good things I'm doing. I'm a hard worker. I'm an academic. And she is. I mean, she thrives in studying Latin. So she's great at it. I do try to make the sort of kid date every now and then. And I kind of sort of the mental checklist of who have I not taken yet. And we have a really cool situation where we live about 2 miles as the crow flies from a vineyard. And it's we're in the middle of nowhere. So this is not like Napa Valley. Okay. Don't get that idea, but we're in the middle of nowhere. And, I can say, hey, let's go get cheesecake at the vineyard tomorrow or this afternoon or whatever. And we can hop on a horse and go through, a national forest on trails and go sit down and eat cheesecake. And I might imbibe some lovely beverage while I'm there. And then that'll make the ride back a little more comfortable. So we'll have that time as we're decompressed. There's very little cell phone signal over the whole route. So it's hard to even get distracted because if you try, it's not going to be very fruitful. So we're doing that. And then, of course, there are the bigger projects, and those, provide their own points for everybody to play their parts.
Yeah. Okay. There are so many things here to talk about. First of all, I'm a little jealous that you live that close to a vineyard and you get to ride on horses and get some wine and cheese in there. That sounds like the awesome day for my wife and I, let alone with my kids. It sounds amazing.
Yeah.
I think the biggest thing that you were saying that is that, sometimes the oldest, and I'm the oldest as well, and I could relate to the concept of this certain responsibility for the family that sort of comes about with it. I know there's a lot of psychological literature on that, but even as a therapist, I'm going to say, let's push it aside and let's talk as a parent to parent. There's something there when there's the oldest, and my oldest is as 16 going on probably adulthood times 10, probably the right way to look at
Yeah.
it. And looking to literally show that she is the boss of the house and she knows best. I'm sure anyone that has a teenager can relate to that.
Yeah.
um, but when it comes to the concept of being able to say, hey, you're part of a family and we do things as a family, but yet, and it's not only awesome that you have those things that you do that you're really good at, whether you're scholastic or good at athletics or both. But whatever it is, that there still is a balance that you, as my child, have to learn regarding the family roles that you play and also the personal roles. And I think for a teenager that's trying to find their own individuality, their own autonomy in life, that could be a real struggle. So when you're talking to your daughter and she's telling you with pride that, hey, dad, I'm doing these responsible things, but yet at the same time you're like, yeah, but we also do things as a family. How do you go about those conversations, and what's it like for you personally to hear that from your daughter regarding the balancing of the emotions of, I love you, but I'm also sad that you're breaking off in a certain way?
Oh, we just did the first college visit the other day. It was great and terrible. It was like that. No, I think the easy answer is start early, and you have to build a family culture. And this goes into a lot about what I've written and talked about as far as consumerism goes. Is consumer culture is kind of part of modern culture, which is really not a culture; it's an anti-culture, because it tells you to question everything, rewrite the book every time, reinvent the wheel with every generation, seek to figure out who you are from your secret, sacred inner self. It's very Rousseauian. And that's just a huge burden to throw on people to try to make up their own identity. And you see it. I mean, people are basically cosplaying their identity. That's why cosplay has gotten popular, because I want to take on this identity that exists in a world with transcendent meaning. At the same time, I don't really believe that world exists. So it's like a pseudo re-enchantment. Anyway, that was a bit of a tangent. But coming back to just start early, have a family culture. For us, we're observant Presbyterian Christians. We observe Shabbat, right, on a different day. But it's very culture shaping. You're an observant Jew, I would take it. And
I'm
so
Irish, actually. This is Irish.
You're Irish.
No, I'm joking.
Irish hat.
Yeah.
I'm not Irish. No Irish at all. But doing those things, it's not just the things you say, it's the things you do, right? And so if you're having Sabbath, if you're having Shabbat, that shapes your family rhythm and culture. We also, I've got some Catholic people I know that go to daily mass. We have daily devotions in the family every night. And so my daughter knows we're actually going to wait up for her unless she's going to be really late coming home from work for that. There are certain things. Having the meals together, well, particularly the evening meal for us is the big one, is just assumed, right? Beyond that, these other touch points that are part of the family culture are also assumed, to the extent that people would say, they would consider themselves really successful on this whole thing if they were having a meal together and that was assumed. Well, these other things were that much assumed in our family. I think that's where a lot of the sort of familial identity and familial cohesion happens. Beyond
And
that,
at the same time, though, when it does come to that assumption of things, and I resonates with me everything that you're saying, especially the family dinners, which I wish I would be able to have more often than we actually do. But I think there's something regarding for a teenager that's trying to have their own identity. That's well, this is something that I know my family does, but I'm trying to become my own person in a certain way.
Yeah.
So I'm doing my own thing. And sometimes it doesn't have to be a disrespectful resistance, but it's a respectful resistance regarding, hey, I'm me and I'm trying to do certain things. So, yes, there are so many foundational parts of our culture and our being of who we are as a family unit that we're trying to give over to our kids. But sometimes there's a pushback. And I think that could be a very important time in a kid's life to know that you can have multiple things that are important, but you have to know how to prioritize. How does a parent give that over? How is that something that with your teenage girl and maybe with, your older boy, or your oldest boy as well, how do you give that over to them?
For us, that's not hard. So like I talked about this college visit, right? Like the college we
Right.
visited is actually like the reason she wants to go there is because that college is an it's a classical liberal arts school in the classical old sense. That's something that we inculcated in her, was a love for these things. If I were to, poll 100 teenagers, how many of them could tell you that the three transcendentals are truth, goodness, and beauty, right? But she would know. And they talk about that. And they were talking about that in math class at this college, right? So it's not hard for us because the big things are settled, if that makes sense. And the culture
Settled,
is
I
already
mean,
there.
as in like
Stepping out from
resonating
it.
inside of her.
Yes, it's already like it's there. Now the bigger deal there, I think, what people are starting to see, and I've just the number of friends just expands seemingly, daily or weekly, that have this huge regret. And it's with my age, right? I just turned 42, so I just have more friends that are raising or have raised to some extent teenagers, and they're having these like panic regret. Why did I let the kid have a phone? That was the worst decision I ever made in my life. So that's not good. I mean, you're a professional and versed in the literature that's just stacking up, and it's all on one side of the table, right? There's no argument about how bad social media and phones are. I just reposted an article the other day about how like most of Gen Z has regrets and they wish they wouldn't have gotten the phone or the social media. But the hardest thing to do as a parent is to say no to mediocre things so that there's space to say yes to great things, right? And so
okay, you gotta expand on that. That's very profound.
I
I'm
will
going to say
unpack
that again, and that's really that's you. That's a very big statement. I love what you're saying, but I think it's important for our listeners to make sure they're understanding that.
Yeah. So the unpacking of that, there are so many mediocre things. They're to compare it to diet. It's the prepackaged, easy, doesn't taste terrible snack that will get you through the next hour, right? Saying no to that for a bigger meal that's handcrafted, that's got some character, that's more deeply nutritious and tastes delicious, right? But it's going to take some work getting there, and it's going to take longer to consume. What we've done, most of us, is we've gone down a path that was sort of pragmatic and that was bending to the urgency of, or what am I saying? The tyranny of the urgency of the moment. And so we've said no to reading War and Peace, and we've settled for reading, whatever twaddle we've read, if there's been any reading going on, right? So at some point we've got to do this super secret, awesome trick of parenting, and that's telling our kids, I'm sorry I screwed up. Mm-hmm. And so we've got to repent to our kids and say, I'm sorry that this happened. I'm sorry that I took you down this road. Now we're going to change things, and it's going to hurt. And I'm sorry. And that could be when you take away the phone or the social media or whatever. It could also be when you say, we're going to do this thing weekly or daily as a family. It could be that, the space that, and the here, okay, you're going to have to repent for how much time you spend on your phone too. Or at least I am, right? And then we're going to say, we're going to sit down as a family, or we're going to have a read aloud time every night from 7, 8, or whatever the thing is. We're going to build those family cultural touchstones from great literature. Okay. So if by the time your kid leaves the house, they have hit, this list of great literature and they all know it, it's not, it's no longer inside jokes with kids from school or about pop culture references. It's inside jokes and rich, deep literary allusions coming into your ordinary everyday conversation from the great works of literature, things like that. You can say no to the trip to Disney World this year, where you will be a consumer of entertainment, and instead say, we're going to build the cabin on that property that we bought, or on, next to our property, or whatever the thing is, so that we can do this big production as a family, this big event of producerism as a family. We're not going to be consumers. We're going to produce something. We're going to work together towards a goal that's going to pay us back, whether that's an extra space or the ability to host friends and family, that kind of thing, or to have income producing Airbnb. Okay. So we've got 2 of those. And we're working on other projects as well. Those are things where you're really planting seeds that are going to be reaped later down the road. But you can take that money that you've gotten from your day job or whatever it is, that you do to bring in money and pay the bills, and you could immediately turn it back into a corporation to entertain you, or you could take that money and invest it in what's essentially going to become a legacy of your family, of being able to work together, of being able to manage projects, of seeing something with multiple pieces and multiple people and multiple personalities all working together actually come to fruition. And then seeing that sprout, down the road, grow fruit and give back multiple times what you put into it. All of those things are teaching you to just be a good person.
And it's basically, the phrase that comes to mind, Keith, as you're saying that is, catch a fish and feed a man for a day, teach a man to fish and feed him for a lifetime. And when
Exactly.
we're able to give that over to our kids, but there's one thing that you said before that I think is really the key to that. And that's us being able to show our kids that we're fallible too. And mom and dad, that, we messed up. We gave you that device.
Yes.
We gave you too much TV time. We let you do certain things that at the time we thought was right. But, when we look at it now, we messed up. So I think that does 2 things. And I talk about this in my practice as well. When we're talking to parents, we're going to how to communicate with kids. If you're going to talk to them in a way where what you're going to say is, you're doing something wrong, you have to fix it. Then it's like, excuse me, there's nothing wrong with me. Or, this thing there's nothing wrong with. But when a parent takes a responsibility and says, I messed up, and this thing that you're doing, it's my fault. So the kid can say, well, tough on you, because it takes away that argument, which I think is what you're saying. And then it also makes it like, oh wait, mom and dad are they're normal human beings. They're not these like on a pedestal, like, like I am thou, that's going to be a little bit more than everyone else. No, we're having a discussion, and,
Right.
and I messed up. And so that's, I think, the biggest thing that I took away from what you were just saying. And to the point of sitting there and reading and stuff. And I want to make this clear, and that it's not just about the reading, it's about the family time. It's about doing things together that is productive. And it could be that, a family decides to plant a garden, to, maybe demo and fix a basement and make a game room together where you have actual, foosball and ping pong type games, and maybe even a Pac-Man or 2, if that's something that, that is within budget. But it's the concept of the doing things together, which I think is what I'm taking away from everything you're saying, Keith. So I think all those
It
points.
is. And you could even produce your own entertainment, right?
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't have to be, we don't do entertainment. We can't have entertainment. We can't have fun. Like, even the Amish have fun. They do entertaining things. They just produce it for themselves, right? So that's huge. Just moving from that consumer mindset to a producer mindset. But really what you're going for in that whole thing, and what a producer mindset and a producer life teaches you that a consumer mindset doesn't, or teaches you something contrary to it, is what your picture of the good life is. So if your picture of the good life is being a productive, helpful, sharing person, that changes the way you look at everything, and it changes how you make decisions. So I don't worry about my daughter like going and being herself. Like, I don't know what that beautiful flower is going to look like, but it's going to be awesome. I'm seeing it in its bud, and it's great.
Right.
But the good life that most of us have been taught to live is a life where we work as little or as fast as possible to make the most money per hour, to stop working and to then be served. We're trying to have a different idea of the good life. And if you can inculcate that in your children, this other idea of the good life, you win the battle. Like there's nothing else to talk about.
Yeah, it's such a good point. And if you can, based on your philosophy, the way you're talking about the producer life, I'm curious if you could sort of say it in like 3 points to parents that you're talking to for the first time that you would say, hey, this is the mindset that can be really beneficial for that family dynamics that you're looking for. What would those 3 points be?
I have no idea. I need 4,500 words. Okay.
You can't narrow it down.
What was it? Okay, so let's see here. 3 points. Well, let me just try points.
Okay.
Let me just try points. The good life is one in which you produce and provide good things. Like that's what you're shooting for. Man, nobody's asked me to do that. It's really funny. I would have to read my own literature, what I've written, and like, I need to get ChatGPT to do it for me.
Okay. So let me ask you the question like this,
Yeah,
Keith. In your life, in the dynamics,
well, how do you do it? Maybe that's the idea.
that you've created within your family dynamics. What would be like 3 points that stick out to you for trying to create that producer culture?
Yeah. Read together, build together. I would say worship together. If that's not your thing, then maybe you can put something else. Serve together. But read together, build together, serve together, whatever that looks like. The reading together, it matters what you read. We already talked about that.
Right.
Maybe I could even share with you. We have a list of books that we think are good.
Family books.
They're family books, but they inculcate this idea that it's beautiful to have this life where you worked hard together.
Oh, okay.
Of course, a lot of those are books in which the family is working hard together to survive. Not working hard together just because they thought it was fun. They're working hard together because they have to survive, but it looks really rich and rewarding and fun. Go figure, right? The problem that we have, and most of the problems we have in modern society, are problems of abundance, problems of superabundance. We're the first, for 2 or 3 generations now, we're like the only people in history, aside from royalty, that have, like in mass, had to figure out how to say no to things. Like nobody had to make these decisions before. Decisions about identity, nobody thought about it. The word loneliness didn't really crop up until I want to say the 16, 17, 1800s. Like it was a long time. Like in the Canterbury Tales and prior, the word loneliness, which Canterbury Tales pretty old, but it just doesn't crop up because nobody got lonely. You couldn't do that. You lived with people. It wasn't you might be suffocated, but you were not lonely. There's so many problems now that we are the first people to deal with.
Yeah.
And we've got to figure out how to do that. We've got to figure out how to survive and thrive in abundance.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to say thrive over survive. Surviving, I think, is what a lot of people have been trying to do. And we want to live a life and we want to be able to make a life for our kids that's about thriving and not just about surviving. And yeah, if you can share with us that.
Well, some kids aren't surviving it.
So it's so unfortunate. And I think that's what we're trying to create. So it's about reading together. It's about building together, which I want to get to. But before that, just to remind you, if you can please send a list of those books, and we'll for sure post that in the show notes. I think it's really important just to be, even if people use that as a guidance. So even if you take that list and like, oh, okay, these type of books, and then you come up with your own list, there's no wrong list when it comes to reading together in the sense of finding the books that are family based. So, not to say that, War and Peace is for a 6-year-old, but, I think it's just knowing how to go about dealing with the concept of reading and creating that reading culture at home. The first book that comes, I don't know why, but the first book, honestly, that came to mind as you were talking was a more recent book, Wonder, regarding a kid being able to survive in school and having certain deficiencies or deformities, physical deformities, and how he was able to have a very, very healthy family dynamics that allowed him to be in a place to be comfortable with who he is, which that's what I was thinking of as you said that. I don't know if that book is on your list, if you're even familiar with the book, but that's for sure something that I think could be really, really beneficial for the family and for kids to realize that, hey, I could be a quote unquote different, but different is really subjective. So, if I'm able to have a good sense of self, and I have a good culture at
Mm-hmm.
home that's teaching me things regarding what I'm supposed to do or not do, then, I'm good. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
able to, and that's where we're teaching our kids to thrive more than survive, like we're talking about.
Man.
So I'm so happy that you brought that up. So I want to go back to that. So we talked about reading, talk about building. Can you expand a little bit more on that? What you mean by that? And then specifically what it is that you do that regarding the building that maybe we can learn from.
Okay, so do you want me to hit the reading first or the building?
So the
Is that all
reading,
about
if
building?
it's okay, if you have like a list,
Yeah.
send it to us and we'll just post it in the show notes, if that's okay.
Okay. Yeah. And I don't know if I will do that. I don't know if this particular book that I'm about to mention is even on that list. I don't think it is, but it should be. And I can't tell you the title yet, but I'll try to go find it. It's actually the book that makes me scared that my children are going to offend some Jewish people at some point, because it's a Jewish book, but it's a proverb. It's a proverbial story, right? The farmer, he's got him and his wife and his 8 kids, his very small house. And he goes to the rabbi, you know
Right.
the one, right?
There's not enough room
And
at
he
home.
says, "Holy Rabbi, help me! I'm going crazy." And of course, I go into Mel Brooks anytime it's a guy saying, "Holy Rabbi." I talk like Mel Brooks. And the rabbi says, "This is what you do. You take a chicken and you bring it into your house." And go. By the time the story's done, he's got the chicken and the goat and the cow and the dog and the cat and all this stuff in the house with them, and they're going crazy. And every week he goes back to the rabbi. The rabbi tells him to put more another animal in his house. And finally, the rabbi says, "Okay, now take all the animals out of your house." And after that, everybody had so much space, and no one's fighting, and life is wonderful, right? So it's all about expectations. But that book didn't say it's all about expectations. That book didn't say that. What's
Correct.
important in life is not how much you have, but how much you love what you have, and being with your family. It didn't ever say that, but it told you a story that taught you that. So the books that you have in your life, they need to do that. The music you have in your life probably needs to do that too. And I am. This is somewhere where I wonder if I should kind of repent, and I kind of do on occasion. I love Led Zeppelin. Okay. Does Led Zeppelin necessarily tell me, what is true and good and beautiful? Kind of. I can make an argument for it.
Sometimes, yeah.
I'll force myself to turn on some classical music. We did the backwards thing when I was in high school by a dark window at night. We freaked out, hit the ground. Anyway, stuff the kids don't do these. Actually, they got record players again, so maybe they do them again.
Maybe.
If they find some Zeppelin. But where was I? The reading, and music. So it's all there's even the people that make the music might think it's neutral or that it's saying something, but it's definitely saying something. The mood that you create in your house by the music that is there is significant, right? Like if I let the kids pick the music all the time, the music is going to be a little more angsty and they're going to act more angsty. And if I'm like, "Nope, we're doing Bach now," like the angst goes down. It's kind of crazy. The same thing with books. Like they are telling you something, even if they're not telling you something.
Man.
One of my favorite authors is Wendell Berry. And sometimes he goes ahead and straight up tells you, but like he really challenges you on what the good life is. And actually, I remember Wendell Berry's daughter in an interview saying that he would tell her, "That is ugly. That is beautiful." Because it is. That's ultimately what you care about. You don't care about the sort of micro decisions your kids are going to make if you agree on what's beautiful. You don't, right? But that's where you're going to find it in the literature, in the art, in the music. There's a 21 Pilots song. 21 Pilots?
I'm not familiar with them, no.
I guess your kids aren't old enough yet. I don't know. But they have some good stuff. But one of the songs is kind of lamenting that being an adult sucks. And So he's like, one of the things like, wake up, you need to make money. And that's what like being an adult is somebody comes and like shakes you out of your sleep every day and slaps you and says, you scum, get out of the house and make money. And so my son's playing the song and I stopped it. I said, hey, I just have to say, I'm not going to stop playing the song, but that's a trash message. Being an adult doesn't suck. Having responsibility and working hard doesn't suck. I enjoy my life. You see me enjoying my life. Does that correspond with how you see it working out for me? And he's like, no, it doesn't, but it is a cool beat. I'm like, okay, but
right. As long as the reality is there for what the song is, and that is not reality. Yeah, that's a really good point.
Exactly. So don't be that reality. You have to model that reality to them.
Yeah.
And that modeling that, getting to like the building part, like we're doing stuff together. A lot of people, and this does not come naturally to me. Like renovating the basement, which on the other side of this wall is a place I need to renovate. I haven't done it. That scares the daylights out of me. Okay. I'm much more comfortable with anything that is expansionary than anything that is like maintenance.
Okay.
And I need to get over that. Like, that's like something that I've got friends that are just so good at that. And I will admit that I am not. I need to change.
In general, you would rather build something new than go back and go into something else that has already been there before.
Yes. And that's not good. Like, that's not a bragging point. I mean, it is to an extent. I think we're all trying to strike that balance, and I have no great principle to lay before you as to how to do that. I think you're ahead of the game if you're trying to do either. If you could do both, you're smoking it. But whatever the project is, they're seeing you model that. Chip and Joanna Gaines, Fixer Upper, sure you know who they are.
Silos.
That's right. But I'm not sure why we ended up listening. I think we ended up doing, this is some time ago, but it was kind of a dated concept already. I think we ended up getting one of those CDs at Cracker Barrel, where you could like pick it up at one Cracker Barrel and drop it off the next Cracker Barrel. It was like Audible before Audible, right? Something like that.
Something that people out from the Northeast are not familiar with, because Cracker Barrel is not something that is all over the place. I'm just putting it out there. I have been around just enough to know what it is, but not personally familiar with it.
That's culture, because that's something that you assume and you don't question until you have to get out of it and realize that it was your culture. No, so one of the things he said though was that he loved Saturdays as a kid, and when he first met Joe, she was like, "Well, this guy is lazy," but later on, they realized that what that meant for Chip was that they went and they worked really hard all morning and maybe into the afternoon, but then they did fun stuff. Like they went swimming, they had people over, they had a party. Saturdays were great because you worked hard as a family and then you let your hair down. Doing that kind of stuff and seeing that, you will see that as fun if you're doing it. And this also gets into the just letting small kids do stuff that you don't think they're ready for. You said earlier that like, well, maybe War and Peace isn't for the 6-year-old. Not to disagree with what you said, but do it anyway, right? There's so many things that they pick up the crumbs of, and you would be shocked at what the 6-year-old does remember, what the 6-year-old does learn. And it's not just it's partially the skill. If you want your kids to hang out with you when you're old, then be willing to hang out with them when they're young.
Ooh, that's a great line.
Play with me, daddy. Let's wrestle, right? I'm ripping that off of somebody, I'm sure. But they are also kids. When kids play, their most natural play, what are they playing at? They're playing at working. They're playing at being an adult. So when you let them play with you, whether it's in the kitchen, whether it's building a building project, whatever it is, when you let them play with you, it's going to take 10 times as long. And that's okay. Because one of the things you are producing is their character. And you can tell them they're a good boy or good girl over and over again. And they're going to know whether or not they're actually competent at skills, or if they're just sucking up oxygen. And if you take that time, even though it takes 10 times as long, to let them help you out, they are actually building, I mean, from like a neurophysiological pathways and all this jazz, right? All this I don't know anything about. I just act like I do a little bit sometimes.
I'm actually trying to find it as you're talking. I'm trying to find a little diagram that I have close by that's actually talking about the limbic system. That it says that the best way to go about kids learning developmentally is to just let them do it, and it builds not just like spatial understanding of how things work, but also confidence, which is one of the things we're always as parents trying to give over to our kids, a level of confidence. Think about your 17-year-old daughter that you've been talking about before, where she's holding today and what she's doing. A lot of the character of where she is because of what you and your family have instilled in her, and not only gave her the seeds, but you helped her plant it in a way where it was in the best soil, and it had the best vitamin D and H2O and everything that it needed, that to not only
And
now
dirt.
and yeah, to not only become the tree, but yet also have a really solid foundation so that it's able to grow and be that rich, which is what we want as parents.
Yep.
We don't want our kids, at least most of us, even though we all love our kids, we don't want our kids to be living downstairs or in the basements or really, really, really close by for the rest of their lives. We want our kids to be the best version of themselves. And that's going to come through the teachings that we're giving them. So letting a kid, giving them a hammer and nail, and I'm so happy you said that, in a probably an age that I'd really rather not give my child a hammer and nail, because I don't know what he might break or do, whether it's on me, them, or the floor or glass or who knows what. But
you're not necessarily worried about them or yourself. You're worried about your tool.
You're 100%.
I really want to give my 8-year-old my impact driver.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. But there's so much to be said regarding that confidence and what they're learning in that point. And it's through the building of that failure that they're going to be the best version of themselves. So we as parents, and I'm saying this out loud for myself, based on what you were just saying, Keith, is that I have to suck it up regarding how much I care about getting the nail in perfectly, that let him do this. And it's through those type of things that I think, for the second point that you're talking about of building, that's what you're talking about. That it's like, all right, let's put up this piece of wood together, and you're not going to hold it as straight as we need to, so we'll figure it out, and let's do that. And let the 6-year-old and the 7-year-old being able to have that quarrel that, if there was 2 other people that we'd be seeing in a parking lot, you might think, their gloves are dropping, and they might just go at it with each other, but they're in the process of just figuring things out on their own regarding how to communicate so that they can hold that piece of wood up straight, so that the 10-year-old brother can actually do what he needs to do to make sure that piece of wood stays where it is. And I think that's what you mean by it. And I'm so glad you said that, because I think there's so many important lessons and rich, deep, valuable lessons that come about through building and working together that I think are so important for that family dynamic. Before we move on to number 3 that you were just talking about, I'm curious, is there anything else regarding the building that you think is like a really important focal point that us as parents need to keep in mind when it comes to this number 2 of building?
It's probably the same thing. I mean, it's like it's way easier to do the thing yourself and to take your phone and put Dora or whatever it is that you do now and give it to the kid so that you can get it done, so you can move on to the next thing. It's not going to be any different when they're 15. Except they're going to be the one making the decision. You can't force them at that point.
Yeah, 100%. 100%. I was like cooking for the holidays. Like, my wife was saying, like, I wish they weren't in the kitchen. I'd move so much faster, but like, there's something to be said about just like
keep them there.
Letting them be in the kitchen and like measure, and like, even though it only called for 1 cup of flour, but somehow 6 cups of flour are missing from the bag now, but there's something to that because of what they're learning, and it's all over the place. And it's like, it goes to places you don't know flour can get to, or we weren't even touching, or we weren't even close to it. But, that's what happens. And I think that's really much of what you're talking about. And just to be clear, building is not just about going outdoors and building a log cabin. and I know that's something that you
Right.
preach. That's something that I want to get back to talk a little bit more about, and what you're involved in. But I think that in general, when it comes to building, it's about doing things together. So whether it's just remodeling a house, or just fixing the furniture and just moving things around together, to baking in the kitchen and preparing a holiday together. That's Or just a family meal. When it comes to shopping, same thing. That it really comes like, yeah, of course I'll go a million times faster if I do it myself. But if there's something to be said about having your kids with you and helping you pick the right apples. No, I want this one because it's a nice shiny red. Yeah, I know, but it's very brown as well. We don't want to take that one, But so there's something that could be learned through those things, which I think is such a valuable lesson. I'm so glad that you were talking about that for number two over here. So, but moving on to number three, and the concept of doing things communally, prayer and stuff like that. I'm curious, like what
Mhm.
comes to mind for you specifically when that's something that is a focal point of what your family culture is like.
Yeah. So back to the Cracker Barrel thing. No, so I assumed something, right, with Cracker Barrel that everybody knows about Cracker Barrel. Well, maybe they don't, right? So it's very hard to undo assumptions. It's very hard to change habits. All right. One of the habits we have is we're at church on Sunday and Wednesday, and the kids would think it was weird if we weren't. One of the habits is having family devotions every night. Sometimes I don't feel like doing that. Sometimes I want the kids to just go to sleep, so I can do what I need to do and go to sleep. They'll actually call me on it at this point.
I want to pause you there for a second. If you for those that might not understand what like devotions are,
Yeah,
could you explain this
yeah, sure. So
just a little bit
it's
for
very
us laymen?
it's basically a small church service. It's pray, read, or what do we do? Pray, sing, read, sing, pray, brush your teeth. Brush your teeth is the sixth
Okay.
liturgical element there. Um, and it's
Is
we
that
have
something
little
added
hymnals
by the
and like
Phillips in general, or is that in general something that's a part of it?
the brushing teeth. I think it was started by the 15th or the 16th century, late 16th century Puritans. The brushing the teeth part. I think that was added then. No, was that a joke or did I get it mixed up? Did you mean the actual format?
I'm completely asking as someone that knows
Okay.
nothing of what you're talking about. So that's why I've been curious. So
Oh, okay.
I was like,
So
oh,
not
I
just
don't
the
know, like
brushing of the
because
teeth. We have this very ceremony. Brush your teeth. Uh, no, the basic format there is coming from really what we know of the early church, which is also what we know of the synagogue um, of that period. The basic elements of what was considered worship, right? And so, really, for us, because of the sort of the theological, strain that we're in through the Reformed tradition, Presbyterianism, uh, it does come from like Scottish, John Calvin and John Knox in Scotland and the English Puritans. They were all very much into doing this as families. They called it the family altar. A lot of them, have family worship morning and evening, modeled on the morning and evening sacrifices of the Old Testament, going back to Job. You see it there, and so there's these touchstones, the beginning and ending of the day, the bookends kind of stuff. For us, it's just the ending of the
right.
day, but those elements were basically drawing out of what's historic Christian worship. It's very simple. So
Okay.
the first thing I have, and then this is what makes it specifically us is because I was an Army guy. I have my oldest son. I say, "Throne Warden, post," and that's Throne Warden is actually coming from a kid's book that they love. And post is in a military ceremony, like a big change command or something, they'll have the adjutant will post and he'll run from the side up to the beginning, up to the center, and he salutes and does his stuff and calls everybody attention and whatnot. So we do that, and then we sing this song called the Doxology, which is just very historic, kind of little ditty that everybody knows by heart. It's very short, and then we're reading passage of scripture. So right now we're reading through the Psalms. I think we're on Psalm 50. I think we might hit Psalm 51 tonight. And then we will sing a longer hymn, and we're trying to learn stuff that we don't already know, a hymn or a psalm, to actual meter of music if it's a song. And we've got a hymn book that's, yay thick, and it's got a lot of really old stuff in there that nobody knows. And we're trying to rediscover some of that. We're actually working on a song right now. Oh, I can't remember the one. I can't remember which one it is, but it's the tune is by Bach, and it sounds kind of like it's closer to Gregorian chant than it is a lot of modern music. So the timing is weird. It's really stretching us. And the kids complained about it at first, but now they're stopping. Now that they're getting better at it, they're understanding it. Their minds are being expanded a little bit. They're starting to enjoy it, I think. And then we just give everybody opportunity to pray, and then we sing the threefold Amen, which is literally singing Amen 3 times. But it's a really beautiful tune.
Wow.
And they break out in harmony.
Wow.
We're a pretty musical family. Our family mission is creativity.
Amazing.
I think it's creative outlets for the most part.
Wow, I love this. I thank you for sharing that. It's good to, I guess, I understand things that I've never understood before, and hopefully other people have learned from that as well. And I think it's just, it's a ingraining of the family tradition and culture in a way where, we're all a part of this, and we all, in harmony. It takes many people to get to the place where you can have harmony. If one person is singing, there can't be harmony. So, it's when we come together and when we do things together, and and I'm sure at different nights the energy sounds differently in different areas of what you're doing, whether it's what you're reading, what you're singing, and that's okay, because it's different energies are going to come up at different places. But the point is to be doing it together. So I guess breaking that down just a little bit more over here. So let's say families that may have different traditions, or maybe they never had tradition on their own, and they're trying to bring in something like that into their families when it comes to doing things, praying and just doing things together as a family. What would you say would be important points for people to keep in mind when it comes to trying to implement this, or to enhancing this type of culture into their home?
Yeah. So the first big hump there is saying that we screwed up because we don't have it. So it goes back to that sort of repenting to your children, and just stating these things clearly, that getting them on board, because you're just like, we're doing this. And we're like, what in the world? There's a book by Patrick Lencioni that escapes me also right now, but it's probably the only book by Patrick Lencioni that is about families, because it takes his business ideas and sort of applies it to family. And having a family mission and family core values and stuff, the way you would do it with a corporation, is kind of how he does it. We've been through that as a family. You probably want to do something like that. And that could be hugely valuable. And you want to bring everybody along to do it, so they're getting on board. Not necessarily going to get on board fast, but hopefully they eventually do. And as far as finding the traditions, some of them you make up, right? Or they come organically. It's the brush. If you ask my kids, what's the end of your family worship liturgy, they'll laugh and they'll say, brush your teeth, because it's a joke, right? It's an inside joke. It's part of our culture. But the bigger, deeper stuff, you're probably just going to have to look to the past, because so much of it has gone away. The modern anti-culture has dispensed with it. So you're going to have to look back a few generations, if not a few centuries. But basically any tradition that you are already in is going to have it. I can tell you the ins and outs of what it means for a Protestant Reformed Christian tradition to be enacted within a family. I have several Muslim friends that I've talked to about this, from Sudan, from Saudi Arabia, from Afghanistan, that they're so close to it that they're just realizing that it's actually being dissolved in front of them right now. And they're going, oh, because they're closer to it. They haven't lost it yet completely. Some of the Jewish people I know, at least when it comes to like the Feast of Booths and stuff, like they're doing things like that, but it's less daily. They might have the weekly rhythm, but they don't necessarily have the daily rhythm. I guarantee you there's something there if you start reading for what people did in the past. Like it's there. Everybody's had this. It's a very new thing to not have it. So basically look to history.
Yeah.
What I just shared with you is ours.
Yeah. I appreciate that. And
actually Buddhism's the same way. Like they have a lot of it. When I explain to people, I say, particularly people that are just like, all religions are the same. This guy, they are basically the same when it comes to ethics. There's not a lot of disparity on like basic, at least the personal ethics, and this is what you should do on a daily basis. Like whether it's the 10 Commandments, whether it's the Buddhist 3 poisons,
right.
Like there's an understanding of ethics that's sort of, I think, programmed into nature so that people can discover it. The only thing that Christianity says is like, yeah, you need forgiveness, and here's the mechanism of it. But how we live our lives at this sort of ethical level is fairly undisputed. And the fact that we need liturgy, that we need culture, that we need community, that we really don't develop an identity apart from our community, that's been understood. We're trying now to develop identities that are completely self-referencing. And good luck. Limitation, things are defined by what they're not more than what they are. A glass of water is a glass of water when it's in a glass, when it has limits. If you take the limits away from it that define it, it's a puddle. It soaks in and evaporates. And I think there's a lot of people finding themselves to be puddles when they have nothing defining what they are. And the thing you said about harmony, though, I think is perfect, because you are searching. You're literally searching for your voice, and you're bending it up to find that point of resonance. And when you find it, it hits, and you know it, and that's who you are, and that's where you are. But what is it? It's in relationship to other things and people, right?
And that's our job as parents.
Music's a great analogy.
And that's our job as parents, to help our kids create that. Because I think it's not just about religion. Even though I think there's a big part of religion that talks about the individual aspect of the person, but yet also the communal aspect, whether it's with prayer services or how we're going to go about living our lives for healthy and proper fulfillment. But I think there is that concept of that, or our job to teach that concept as parents for our children, that yes, you're an individual and you're trying to have your own identity, but yeah, you're also a part of something. And when me as a dad who has a responsibility to teach my daughter that, yeah, I understand that you want to do your own thing right now, but it's also, it's right now, Jewish New Year time, and we have things we need to do right now, and that's what we need to do. And later you'll get a chance to hang out with your friends, and don't worry about it, because they're really important in your life, and they're really good people to you. But we're also family, and this is what we do as a family, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. And I think if that message is given over, no matter what religion you're from, that's a message that is planting that, not only giving the seed to the child to plant, but it's helping them plant, like we were talking about before. And for those people, just to finish up, I think the way you were talking, I think, was like so amazing, and everything you said really resonated with me, and hopefully it does with people listening to this. When it comes to a family that doesn't have those traditions themselves, and parents recognize that, and they might be, look back at their own history, or maybe unfortunately they don't have history to look back on for whatever reason. And unfortunately that is the case for a lot of people, that they don't have a family background or history to say, oh, let me go back to something. Well, go back into history, go back for yourself, go back into wherever you're living, or, if you see if it could reach out to an elder within the family that can give you some understanding about where you come from. Because most of us, whether you're listening to this podcast anywhere in the world, you're coming from somewhere, and you're part of something. And if you could get any of that information, you can sort of just staying curious with it. I talk about a concept in my office a lot of ABC. You have to always be curious. And when we stay curious, it allows us to be able to learn more about who we are and what we're about and what we're trying to figure out, whether it's that situation, whether it's about our culture or religion. It teaches us so much. And I think when
Oh
we're
yeah.
trying to bring roots from other places and regraft that into our own tree, it really helps our tree grow and fortify what it is that we're trying to do in our family tree, which I think has been the message for this entire talk that you and I have had, which we could probably go on forever over here. But I want to be able to give you an opportunity to talk about something that really caught my eye, which is probably one of the reasons why I think we first contacted in the first place. But there's something that you specifically do with building, and maybe you can share with our listeners that I think maybe they can gain from.
Yeah. So uh, if you haven't noticed, housing's really expensive right now. And in some places, it's been expensive for quite some time. And some friends of mine, David and Carrie Fraser, up in Ontario, Canada, uh, were living in a 2-bedroom house with 3 kids. And Carrie was having some significant medical problems at the time. And her parents needed to come and be there and help, sometimes when she was there, sometimes when she was in the hospital, and then David was in and out. And it was just completely difficult to do that. And adding a home addition wasn't happening. I mean, if you look at a home addition right now, even in the cheaper parts of the country, you're looking at like $200 a square foot plus. And that's probably without much in the way of wiring and plumbing. So it's very, very expensive. And they built this thing, this concept in Canada called a bunkie, which is just Canadian shorthand for a bunkhouse, small building that you throw up that you can put some cots in or some sleeping bags or whatever, so that there's a roof over somebody's head and it's going to cut the wind, and you've got a place to sleep. And for Canadians, particularly in Ontario, it's kind of like Michigan or Minnesota more so, I guess, with the gazillion lakes. And it's very common for people to have a small cottage next to the lake, and then on weekends they go hang out with the family at the lake. And then when the kids have kids and there's not enough room for everybody in the small cottage now, building a huge cottage isn't financially possible for most people, but you can throw up a bunkie. So people started to ask them about these things, and they eventually were really they have mass produced through other suppliers, getting them to cut boards and stuff. They eventually made their own factory, opened it up back in 2020. And so they're producing a very high quality, all spruce cabin kit, small cabin kit it's link log construction. So it's like Lincoln logs or like Lego. People say it's like Legos or Lincoln logs. Yeah, that's what it is. So almost everything is pre-cut and notched, and you throw it together, essentially pound it together a little bit with a hammer. And you put screws in each corner, and it goes up really fast. And so what my family's done with them is not really for extra space for ourselves or for our families, though our families do sometimes, or extended family comes, they'll stay in them. We've used them for Airbnb income. We're in a rural area. We didn't have to go through a lot of permitting and deal with the government kind of stuff. But you're talking about, for us, finished out with heating and air, plumbing and everything for somewhere around $1.10 a square foot. And
Wow.
something, so if you're not using it all the time, you don't need to go, because they are thin walls. We insulate below and above. The walls are basically the thickness of a 2x4. It's actually these boards that are behind me. But they seal so well that the walls don't matter. Most of the heat wants to go up, right? Anyway, or the cold wants to go down. So if you insulate above and below, it works out quite well, and they're far more efficient than you would think. And so, one of the reasons that I could have various entrepreneurial endeavors, this being one of them, with Bunkie Life, getting this product out to the U.S. market and just kind of explaining to people what this is and why you would use one. It's not to replace your house. It's not necessarily to be a tiny house that people use them for that. It's because you need some space that's occasional use, and you don't want to pay the full-time price to get the same sort of conventional building done,
Right.
that's going to cost you an arm and a leg for that thing that you're only going to use occasionally. It's a craft room, man cave, space for the in-laws when they visit, the grandkids when they visit. This is a great option. And if you could do it for, far less than $1 a square foot. If you're going on the cheap and you're just hey, we're not going to wire it. When you come, it's going to be camping in grandpa's backyard, that kind of thing, or your climate maybe doesn't even require it for some people. And then it's just a great family project. And for me, that's where it really dovetails in with our philosophy as a family. We've seen so many people now put these things up together, and you're building extra space, you're building memories, building it, and then how do I say this? I think I put this in a commercial at one point. You're building it together, and then you're building memories together as you use it down the road, and you're building those memories as you build it. But you're not just building memories; you're building, the competencies. Because most people, face it, they're not going to go fell a tree. Probably not gonna just frame it up from 2x4s and do all of the things that you should do in building a proper structure. Because they just don't have.
So when
the
you have a
skills
kit
anymore.
that's available out there, that sounds like a no-brainer for
But
a
it's a
lot
good
of people.
bridge.
Where can people?
Right?
Yeah, well, for sure. Where can people get more information and find out how to get a bunkie?
Yeah. So check out heartlandbunkies.com. Heartland, spelled like Heartland. Bunkies, BUNKIES.com. That's our website. And there's a bunch of different models on there that go from 34 square feet up to, we actually don't have it on the website yet. We will shortly, 389 square feet between 2 levels. And also because of FAQs about wiring and plumbing and insulation and all that on there to check out. And you can also check us out on all the socials, just Bunky Life Heartland, at Bunky Life Heartland.
Yeah, and we will post all the show notes, all the links in our show notes. So I'm sure that's something that people would like to get more information about. Keith, this has been absolutely amazing. I like finishing with some rapid fire questions just to sort of loosen it up a little bit, even though it's been pretty loose and like a pretty nice conversation, and just the
sip of
way
coffee,
it flowed
so I'm
over
ready.
here. So if you were to think of one person in history that you would like to have dinner with, and that's not alive anymore today, who would that person be?
Oh, wow. Hannibal. Not the guy in the movie that ate people, but the guy that attacked Rome successfully for 2 decades on elephants.
Okay, that's an awesome one. We've never heard that one before. What would be something based on our conversation today? Oh, that's a good one. I'm not sure if we had them either. That's a really good one. What would be something based on our conversation today, whether it's a book or a podcast, you would recommend people get more information and learn more about these 3 main things to help with family dynamics?
Ooh, let's see here. Okay, shameless plug for the Stay at Work Home, our podcast. And I shouldn't just stay with a shameless plug. What would be another one that's really good as far as this goes? There's a guy named George Grant who is worth reading, looking at. Really, I would say this isn't answering your question exactly, but I would say read Wendell-Berry.
Wendell-Berry. Okay, we talked about him before.
Read Wendell-Berry.
And also, what's the name? Patrick
Lencioni
before as well. Yeah, right. That his family book, which his
family book. I think there's only one family book.
Yeah. So that's something that I think could be beneficial as well. So thank you for that. My last question for you, Keith, would be if you can think of an everyday mundane superpower that you would like to have as a parent to help you, what would that superpower be?
Knowing who hit who first.
Oh, so well said. Oh, that was amazing. That was such a great answer, Keith. This has been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us, and I look forward to future conversations.
Likewise. Have a good one.